guys, today I'm going to start putting these cab mounts on this frame. And I've been messing with this one for a little while because I've never done this before, so I'm learning just like you guys are. But it's kind of tedious to get this thing set up. But let me go through and show you what I got so far, and then we'll work on putting these frame mounts on this frame. This is for the cab. You want to do the cab first, because the cab, wherever you set the cab is where everything else sits according to the cab. So I'll explain why I set it, where I set it, and we'll go through that, okay? All right, let's go. All right, so first of all, you need to know that you can either, you got two choices on these mounts. You can either weld them in place or you can bolt them in place. And I have decided to bolt these in place. I don't have to, I guess. I could weld them, but I think it's going to be easier to bolt it. Well, I don't know if it's going to be easier to bolt them or not, because these here, the cabs, the frame is fully boxed, so it's hard to get to the back side of these to get to the bolts in. To get the nuts on the bolts, I should say. So it might be easier to weld these, but I've already got everything painted, and I already decided I was going to bolt them on anyhow. I bought the bolts, so I think that's what we're going to go with here. All right. So how many bolts do you need to do this kit? Well, here you go. As you can see, I got a lot of bolts here, a lot of bolts. You're mainly going to need 3/8 bolts. A lot of this stuff bolts on with 3/8 bolts, 3/8, 16 by 1. I do need some carriage bolts for the running boards and the bed, I believe. But the bolts that I needed, I think I needed, like the list called for around 50 or 60 bolts. I just bought a bag of 100 because it's easier, and it was actually less money than buying 60 of them individually. So what I did is I went online to this company called Bolt Depot, and I think their bolts, I've bought from them before, and I think their bolts are better quality than the crap you buy at the hardware store. You can see here's a flat washer. You can see it's nice and thick. The flat washers that I've seen lately at the hardware store, they're almost sheet metal. They're pathetic. But I bought these because they're good quality. One other thing I did, well, you're going to need 1/4 inch hardware. You're going to need 3/8 hardware. You're going to need 1/2 inch hardware, and you're going to need 7/16 hardware. And the 7/16, what is that for? Dadgummit. Oh, that's the 7/16 bolts are to mount the cab to the cab mounts. So that's what those 4 bolts are for the cab mounts. The 1/2 inch hardware, I believe, is for the bumper mounts. Okay. What I did, you don't have to do this, but what I did is I got, as you can see, this nut here has got 3 lines on it. It's a grade 5 nut, or bolt. I said nut, good night. Bolt. This bolt has 3 notches, 3 lines on it, so it makes it a grade 5 bolt. I went with grade 5 because I wanted something a little stronger. So, and I don't remember for sure, but either the flat washers or the lock washers are also grade 5. Now, I've had people tell me, well, there's no such thing as a grade 5. Well, I don't know if that's true or not. Here's a little marking on that one. It just says MC, okay? It doesn't say 5 or anything. But I don't know if that's true or not, but I wanted to get something as good a quality as I could get, because I want to be able to tighten these bolts up nice and tight so they don't move. And the nuts on these, get this open. Come on. There we go. The nuts, I also got grade 5. You can see that side's got nothing on it. This side here, see the 2 lines? There's a line there by my thumb and another line over here. That's how you can tell if you got a grade 5 nut. So I not only got, you know, if you go to the hardware store, you're going to pay quite a bit of money for grade 5 bolts and grade 5 nuts. You know, you can buy the grade 3 stuff if you want, but I didn't want to. I wanted to buy the heavier stuff for all this, and it came to 3/8 stuff. I just bought a bag of 100 bolts, 100 nuts, 100 lock washers, and I bought 200 flat washers because I was going to need like 120 or 130 of them. And it was just cheaper to buy. Believe it or not, it's cheaper online to buy just a bag of 100. So that's what I did. Everything else I bought what the list called for. But I paid for all this with shipping and everything. I paid $135. So I mean, it's not terrible, but it's not cheap either. You're going to need a lot of bolts to do this. So I wanted to show you that real quick. Okay. So that's all the bolts you're going to need to do this with. All right. Now, when you mount these mounts, if you look at this mount, you'll notice I got my bolts in the bottom hole. There's three holes above that, and these 3 holes are for setting the height of the cab, which determines the height of the vehicle. Okay. Now, the most common one, if you read his, let me get his paper here. If you read his paper, it says 4 inches is the recommended install height for these mounts, okay? And if you look at these pictures in here, I'll show you where it shows it at. In here, there we go. So that's what those 4 holes are for. The bottom one is 5 inches, the second one up is 4, the second one up is 3, and the second one up is 2 1/4. So, depending on how you want your truck to sit, is in relationship to the frame, is what's going to matter on these bolt holes. Now, I will tell you this: 4 inches is the most commonly recommended one. 4 inches is, I could have used these bolts here. 4 inches puts your running boards even with the bottom of your frame. So if you want to bag the truck and you want to drop it down, your running boards are going to be right on the ground. Okay. I decided to go with the 5-inch because Bo doesn't care about any of that stuff. He's never mentioned one time to me about how he wants this thing lowered. As far as I know, he wants it the stock height, and it's going to be the stock height. It's going to have 15-inch tires on it. It's not going to sit, down on the ground. And I don't want him to have to drive over a speed bump or something and scrape the running boards. So I decided to go with the 5-inch height. And I will tell you this, and Russ at Russ D Products told me this. The lower you go, the more trimming you have to do in order to get it to fit. Oh, and another thing, the more trimming you have to do to get it to fit. So you have to trim the inner fenders on them 48 Chevy truck fenders. You got to trim the inner fender to go around the A-arms on this thing, because the factory frame only had a leaf springs in the front, so it didn't have all this stuff up here. So you got to trim around there. But at 5 inches, you trim a very small amount. If you want to go all the way down to 2 inches, you're basically going to cut that fender well, the inner fender, in half. I mean, you're going to cut a lot out of it. It's going to be a lot more work, a lot more trimming. So, and I'm trying to save time on this build. I don't want to have to do a bunch of, of that stuff. So that's the other reason I decided to go with the 5-inch, was to keep the running boards off the ground, to reduce the amount of trimming I got to do to make everything fit. And also in the back, if you go with the 5-inch, your bed is basically going to sit at the stock height. You're going to have an actual full bed in the back of the truck, which I think looks better. So that's why I decided to go with the 5-inch height. So now I have to set this mount. I have to try to get all 4 mounts set the same. Okay, so I got one here, one over there, and then I got 2 in the back. So the way you do this is you go 2 1/8 of an inch from this notch forward, okay? And that 2 1/8 of an inch is where you want the edge of your mount to be. So what I did is I took a tape measure, and I measured 2 1/8 inch out, and then I took a square and laid it on the frame and marked a mark down the frame with a Sharpie. Well, a Sharpie's black, my frame's black, it's hard to see. So I took some blue painter's tape and I followed down the line with the tape. That's where that way I know where my 2 1/8 of an inch is. So I line this edge up of the mount with the tape. After I drill my holes, I'm going to pull this mount off. Of course, I'll pull the tape off. I won't have to worry about it. But I use the tape to mark so I could tell exactly where the edge of the mount would be in relationship to the frame. Okay, so now I know I'm right there. So now I got a C-clamp holding everything in place. I've got 4 holes to drill in here. I could probably get away with two holes, but I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill this hole out and this hole out, and then I'm going to drill this one and that top one in there. But you definitely want to put 1 bolt in here, at least 1 bolt in here, because your running board mount sits here and your running board sits in that. When you step on your running board, you don't want any flex in this part of this mount. So if you put a bolt there, I mean, you could put 2 bolts in if you wanted to, but the main thing you got to remember is when you step on it, it's going to push down on this. Okay, it's going to push this downward, which is going to tend to try to pull the plate away from the frame. So if you put a bolt at the top, it's going to hold it when you step on it, and it's going to be pushed against the frame on the bottom, so it's not going to move. And to tell you the truth, these mounts are thick enough that you probably don't have to worry about flexing them. But Russ recommends at least 4 bolts to hold it in. And you've got 2 bolts at the top. So you got this bracket here. See that? This bracket here is part of it. So you got to bolt that through. And then I got to drill holes from the top down in order to get bolt nuts on those, or to bolt this bracket to the frame. I mean, not to get nuts on them, but I got to drill there. To get nuts on them, I got to come in from this side. So I'm gonna drill holes there too. And this bracket here has slots in it on both ways, so it's really nice to be able to move it around and get it where you want it to be. And these holes here are cut really tight. I POR'd all these brackets, and I actually had to take a hammer and force these bolts into the holes because the POR made them so small that I couldn't get them to go. So that's how tight these bolts are. If this was bare metal, those bolts would just barely fit in those holes, which is good because it holds it really well. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my drill and I'm going to mark my holes where I'm going to drill them, and then I got to take this bracket off and then actually drill them. And then I got to figure out a way to get the nuts on the back side, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. So let me get this marked with my drill, and then we'll work on figuring out how we're going to get this thing all to fit together. All right. Let me get you guys, let's see. I guess I can put you probably over here. All right. Yeah, I think you can probably see okay there. Come on. All right, get you in there where you can see. You don't need to see me, you need to see what I'm doing. Okay, let me get my drill and my extension cord. So what I'm going to do is I got an electric drill. Okay, I don't have one of them cordless ones, but I like electric because you don't have to worry about changing batteries. So I got a 3/8 bit on here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the bit in the hole that I want to drill, and I'm going to push the bit into the metal and just basically mark the metal. I don't necessarily need to drill all the way through it. I want to mark it, and I don't know how sharp this bit is. We'll see if it goes all the way through or not. I don't know. So I'm going to mark my hole to start with. There we go. Now this bit's pretty sharp. I could probably drill all the way through that, no problem. So now I'm going to take my mount off here. So now I've got all my holes marked. I know where it's going to be. So I can take my tape off, take my C-clamp off. I don't have to worry about any of that because I know where my holes are going to be. Okay. Let me zoom you guys back out so you can see more of what's going on here. All right. I can take this off. Oh, by the way, You want your running boards to be level on this frame. So what you want to do is once you get your C-clamp on here and you get this thing set, you want to make sure it's square. So you want to measure it. I measured it from here up to the top and from this side up to the top, and it was 4 5/8 of an inch on both sides. I made sure it was the same on both sides, okay? And then I measured the bottom, because the bottom is what's important. And the bottom was about 5/8 of an inch from the bottom of this bracket to the bottom of the frame. And you want to measure on this side, then you want to come over and measure on this side. See that? Measure here, then measure there. Make sure they're both the same, because that's going to set this bracket level with the bottom of the frame. And when you do the back one, when you do the back bracket, you want to do the same thing, set it. So now that I've set this one at 5/8, I want all my brackets to be at 5/8 all the way around, okay? That way my running boards are all the same height. All right, let's take this apart, get it out of the way. There we go. Set that on the floor because it's not going to sit there. And I never went over the tools you need either. So you're going to need, get this off here again. You're going to need a C-clamp. You're going to need a drill, whether it's cordless or whatever, corded. And you're going to need well, in my case, I'm going to need a grinder, and I'll show you why. You're going to need a tape measure, a hammer. I got a square right here, so I can make sure everything's square. When I first put the bracket on there, I want to square it up. I use the square to draw my line with too. See how the tape goes down there? So that's where my line was. And now you can see the holes that I've marked. So that's what you're going to need. You're going to need a good drill bit, obviously. Maybe a few drill bits. Okay? So that's what you're going to need. Not a whole lot, but you need a few things. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is if I can find my brother doesn't have a lot of selection when it comes to drill bits. So I'm going to take a small drill bit. Now that one there is not going to work. It's got a different type of tip on it. So I'm going to take this one. I'm going to take a small drill bit. A smaller drill bit like this. And I'm going to use it to drill a pilot hole with. That way if you drill a pilot hole first, you don't have to worry about your bit wandering on you and your hole being off. So I like to always drill a pilot hole first. And you can drill a pilot hole pretty much any size. I mean, if I'd have left the bracket in place, I could have drilled all these holes and probably been fine. But I want you guys to be able to see what I'm doing, so I took it off. I don't need this tape anymore because I've marked my line. I know where that's at. So we're good to go there. All right. And for some reason, this drill sounds horrible when I'm running it, but not much I can do about that. Oh, that wasn't even tight in there for some reason. All right, so now I'm going to drill my pilot holes. I don't know if anybody ever taught you guys this, but if you're using an electric drill that's got a chuck like this with a key, I always, the very first hole I go into, I'll tighten the bit up a little bit, and then I'll go to the second hole, and I'll tighten up a little tighter, and then I'll go to the third hole, tighten up a little tighter. I was always taught to do that just because it ensures the bit's in the chuck properly, but I don't know if it helps or not, but it's what I do. All right, let's see if this bit's sharp enough to drill these holes now. I had this drill on a hammer. That's why it was making that noise. All right, there's my 4 pilot holes drilled. Oh, I forgot to mark my top holes. I got to drill them too. Well, guess I have to mark those later. All right, now we're going to drill our 3/8 holes. Here's what I recommend you do on this, okay? I recommend you drill 1 hole, so let's drill 1 hole. I'm just going to pick this middle one. Through there pretty easily. Then I'm going to take my mounting bracket and I'm going to get a 3/8 bolt and I'm going to put it in the hole that I just drilled. All right, and then I'm going to take and put my bracket on my frame. Put that bolt in there. Dang. Well, that's tight. So I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I kind of like that actually. Hold on a second. All right, so I'm going to take a ratchet and I'm going to screw this bolt into the frame here. Fits good and snug. I could have taken a tap. That's one way you can mount these too. If you've got a box frame like this and you don't want to have to try to figure out how to get nuts on the back side of this, you could actually tap these and bolt them in. But I'm not super comfortable with the thickness of this frame holding threads very well, so I'm not going to recommend that. I'm going to put nuts and washers on the back side of mine. But anyhow, all right, so now that I got that in there, now I can take and make sure my holes are lined up, and some of them aren't. They're off. But I can tap my bracket and move it a little bit. Check my measurement on the bottom, that's what matters. All right. Okay, I'm the same there, so that's about where I need that to be. All right, and that actually moved. I had it at 5/8, but now it's at like 7/16, so it moved a little bit, which is fine, no big deal. So now I'm going to try to find my bolt hole that's lined up the best. So it looks like this one is. So I'm going to drill that one out. There we go. And I can put that bolt in. All right. I'm going to take these back out. So I don't have to put a flat washer on them, but I'm probably going to. All right, so now I got those two in. Now I can drill the other two because they're a little bit off, but they'll drill fine. They're just not quite perfect. So basically, I used my mounting bracket as a guide to make sure these lined up because they weren't perfect. That's why I like to drill a pilot hole first, because if you do that and you're off a little bit, you can still get it right drilling it with the larger bit. If I had drilled all 4 holes to start with a 3/8 bit and one of them would have been off, then I would have been screwed. So if you drill a small pilot hole first and then drill out one to the size, the final size you want it to be, and put a bolt in there, if the others are off, you can mount the bracket in place and still get it right. So that's a good note for you guys. You don't want to remember that, okay? All right, so, and now I can drill the top holes for this top bracket. I'm kind of glad I didn't drill those now that I think about it. I can drill the top holes for that top bracket because this is already in place and I don't have to worry about it moving on me or shifting on me. You know what, now that I think about it, I can go ahead and put flat washers on these. This is one thing that I hate. I don't know why they do this. A bolt, this is a 3/8 bolt, this is 3/8 flat washer, right? Look at that. See that slop in there? I would rather the washer fit tight on the bolt. I mean, these aren't bad. I've seen them a lot worse, but I just wish they made the hole in the washer fit the exact size of the bolt. It drives me crazy. I guess just because I'm so picky, I don't know. Anyhow, no big deal. All right, so we can put our washers on these bolts now. I don't know what size bit that is, but I like it because it allows me to screw these bolts in the frame. That's pretty cool. It must be slightly smaller than 3/8, I guess. I'm not having a hard time screwing these in there. Yep, these other two were a little tighter because the holes were lined up perfectly. This one here was a little off, but I can still, snug it up in there. Not bad. All right, I'm gonna get this one out. We'll put a washer on it. I have a little bit of a concern whether these two washers on these two bolts are going to conflict with each other. I don't know. Trying to get this where you guys can see it while I'm working. Tap that bolt to get it started down there. Go. Now I can unscrew these two. Now that the other two are in place, I can unscrew these two and put washers on them. Come on. All right. those washers are gonna just miss each other. That's good. Like I said, if you wanted to not use washers on this side of the bracket, you could get away with it if you're trying to save money. But I got 200 washers. I'm not going to run out anytime soon. So. I got plenty of washers to use. Okay, so now we got all 4 of those in. Let's take a look at what we got. All right. Well, we've got those 4 bolts in. These 2 are really close to each other, but this is very good support for this mount. And I'm going to put, again, I'm going to put 2 more on the back side of this to the top of the frame. So it's going to be really strong when I'm done. One thing I didn't tell you guys you want to remember is if you're using the 4-inch mount, the 4-inch cab height, which is these 2 holes, you know, these holes here are going to be down here where the bracket is. And these holes that I'm using for the bracket will actually be down here. And you could probably drill through the frame and put 2 bolts up here and then 2 more bolts down here. I would definitely put one inside of here though. But you can drill, you know, you can use these bolts and drill through the frame at the top as well. I can't do that because I'm using a 5.5-inch height. And if you use either one of these holes, your bracket is actually going to be below the frame. So Russ gives you, if you're going to do that, and you tell Russ, he gives you a set of 4 more of these, and you mount them on the bottom of the frame coming up and into these 2 bottom holes, and then you drill 2 holes in the bottom of the frame and 2 holes in the top of the frame. Then you can also put, you know, a bolt or 2 in here too if you want. Well, yeah, you need to. He recommends at least 6 bolts to hold the frame together, to hold the mounts on the frame. And I mean, all you're doing is holding the cab, so it's not like it's the entire body of the truck or anything. So you're just holding the cab. 6 bolts, 3/8 grade 5 bolts are going to be plenty strong enough to hold this thing, no problem at all. But that's how that looks, okay, when I'm done with it. So now I need to drill the holes in the top of my frame here, and then I need to figure out, okay, I've got a boxed in frame. See that over there? It's boxed in all the way back to there, and I'm up in like this area right here. So now I got to figure out how am I going to get nuts and washers and all that on the back side of this into those bolts. Well, that's going to be a trick, and there's a couple different ways to do that. But let me get you guys over on the other side so you can see what I'm doing over there. Okay? All right, let's go over there. Get you in here where you can see right inside the frame. All right, get you on the mount there. Now you're going to be inside the frame here where you can see what I'm doing, okay? All right, let me get set up here, then we'll continue. Hold on. Okay, I'm back. So now what I've done is I've taken a ratchet and an end wrench, just a regular old end wrench, and tighten these up because they're not going to move. I know where they're at. Okay, they're flat against the frame, so they're where I want them to be. Now I need to take my drill and drill downward and put bolts in the top here. So let's do that. And I got a slot here so I can put it wherever I want. I'm gonna move it toward the outside as much as I can get it because I don't want it to hit against this bolt. All right, there we go. One thing you want to remember when you're drilling, them shards coming off that drill bit are hot. If they land on your skin, they're going to burn you, so you need to be careful of that. If you're worried about it, wear gloves. I'm not too worried about it, but just want to be aware that those shards are hot. So now I'm going to put bolts through the top here. Well, good idea to have a hammer. Kind of tap on that, get it started in there. I could take a tap and tap these out if I wanted to. Well, that one doesn't want to start. That one doesn't either. Come on, baby, get in there. Probably going to burger the threads up on them a little bit, but I'm sure I'll get a nut to go on them. Not worried about it too much. It'll be kind of like a lock nut. Okay. All right, so now we got the mount fully bolted on. But now we're like, okay, how am I going to get nuts on the back side of these bolts, right? Well, that's going to be a problem. Okay, so we've got a few choices here. Number one choice, you come over here. If you got a wife or a girlfriend and she's got skinny hands and skinny arms, at least on the older frames, you can reach up through here. I can almost reach those bolts, put my hand in there, but I can't quite. So, and one thing I could do if I wanted to, I could take a grinder and I could cut, see how this lip folds in all the way around there? I could take a grinder and I could cut that lip off, and I could probably get my hand in there. But the problem is this hand, I can get in there really easily, but this hand is facing the wrong way. I need to get my right hand in there. And to get my right hand in there would be really pretty difficult to do. I don't know how much luck I'd have reaching it. So I don't think that's a very good idea to cut that flange out. But if you got a 12-year-old child or a girlfriend with, or wife or whatever with skinny arms, you can get them in there that way. I can't. So now I'm faced with the dilemma of going in this way with them, right? So I asked Russ what he did, and he said, excuse me, he said what he does is he gets a hole saw, a 2-inch hole saw, and drills holes in this frame. I guess you probably have to put 4 of them in there to be able to get in there and get those bolts. Well, I guess that's fine, but it's going to take a while to drill 4 holes. And hole saws, when you drill, especially when you drill metal as thick as these frames are, unless you got a really good quality hole saw, they tend to go dull on you, and you end up going through 2 or 3 hole saws at $15-20 a piece just to drill out, because you got 4 holes here and 4 holes on the other side, so you're going to drill a total of 8 holes with a hole saw. So I'm not really in favor of that idea very much either. So what I decided I'm going to do is I'm going to get down here and get this. I'm going to take my handy dandy $14 Harbor Freight grinder, and I'm going to cut a rectangle out of here right there. So I know where my bolts at. I know they're right there. So I can cut a rectangle out of this and then put my bolts and nuts on, and then when I'm done I can weld it back in there. Now if you don't have a welder, that's obviously not going to be feasible for you. But to me, that's the quickest and easiest way that I know to do this. So that's what I'm going to do, because I can weld that piece back in and maintain the structural integrity of this frame. Depending on how big a piece I cut out, I could probably cut it out. You know, if I cut a piece that was, you know, maybe only half the distance from here to here, cut it right in the middle, I could probably not even have to weld it back in. But then I'd have a really hard time getting my hand in there to try to get all six, because I got 6 nuts, lock washers, and flat washers to put on here. I got 6 of them, so I don't want to have to fumble around with it. So I'm just going to cut a big enough hole that I can get my whole hand in there and not have to fight it. So let's do that. I got to switch my cord here. Hold on. Okay. All right. Now let's cut this out. All right, now because this side of the frame has this shelf sticking out on it, I couldn't get my grinder to go all the way down to the bottom. I think I'm gonna put it back in there and try to go a little lower, but I got the top to cut, so I can take a screwdriver and just pull that out and just wiggle it back and forth, hopefully get it to break off. But I'm gonna try to cut a little more off there first. So let me do that, and then we'll try to get it out of there. There we go, I got it. I made a couple little marks on the frame, but that's not going to hurt anything. All right, so let's tap that. It should come right out of there. There we go. That's probably hot. I need something to grab it with, and I don't have anything to grab it with. All right. All right, there's that. So now you can see the thickness of that frame. I mean, that's probably 1/8 inch thick steel, but you're gonna tap that with threads. You're not gonna have very many threads. I guarantee you strip it out pretty quickly. Now, let me get you in here so you guys can see this. Now I've basically given myself full access to this. You can see the 3 of the bolts there. There's another one over here, and of course these 2 here are really easy to get to. So now I've made it real easy to get to, and all I got to do when I've done is just, and this grinding wheel I've used is a 1/8 inch grinding wheel. So it basically made this piece of metal 1/8 of an inch smaller than the hole is, which is perfect for welding it back in, because I can put it back up there and, you know, have a little bit of a gap and just fill it in with weld. No big deal. So I like that idea. I think that idea is really quick. I guarantee I could not have drilled 4 holes with a hole saw that quickly. There's no way. But now I can get in here and I can put washers and everything I need to get. I just thought of something. I don't know if this may not work. Well, I guess it probably will. I don't know. We'll see. So now I can get in there. I think I can get in there with my hand and get this nut. The nut's going to be the hard part to get on there, is get the nuts on. The washers are easy, of course, but you got to get the nut to start. Come on. Wow. Oh, there we go. All right, got that in there. That's a tight fit, but it's a lot easier than trying to reach up through that frame. I was afraid I'd booger these threads up. When I screwed these bolts in there, but so far I haven't had that problem. All right, two more on the bottom here. It definitely isn't easy. It's hard to get in here, but I could have made this a little bigger, but I don't want to make it any bigger than I have to if I can keep from it. I dropped my washer, dang it. Hold on a second. Probably a good idea to have a magnet handy in case you drop something, so you can grab it. There we go. All right, got my washer on there. I'm gonna get my lock washer. Okay, come on. This is a little tricky to do one-handed, especially to get the nut to start. But takes a little patience. Come on. Ah! Got the nut. Just showing you guys how difficult this is. It's not just a simple thing, you know. Dang it, I dropped it again. Okay. Come on, baby, start on it. Come on. Come on. Come on. Well, that one there feels like it's a little stiff. So I can get in here with my wrench. once I get it past the end of the thread where I kind of mess the thread up a little bit, it should screw on fairly easily after that. Or maybe not, but it's going on, it doesn't matter either way. Oops. Just take an end wrench and you can turn these. They got lock washers on them, so they're not going to come loose. But one other thing you could do if you wanted to, I just thought of, you could also take your welder, and before you weld this plate back on, you could put a little spot weld on each one of these nuts and weld it to the bolt. Of course, the problem with that is you're never going to get it off again, but you know, maybe you don't care, I don't know. Probably not going to need to get it off again once you get this truck built. This hole is just big enough to be able to get this wrench in here. And of course, if you had a hole saw, if you cut a hole with a hole saw, you wouldn't be able to do this. So I think, and if you ran your arm up through here, you could get the nuts on there, but you wouldn't be able to get a wrench in there to tighten them up. I think that'd be pretty difficult as well. So I personally think this is probably the best way to do this. Now I got to get these ones on that are upside down. They're going to be a little bit of a trick because I got to figure out how I'm going to hold the washer in place and then put the nut on there. I'll get it to start. There's that one. I got it to start. Oh, I got one more nut to put in there. Why don't you guys tell me? Easy Joe's. All right. Kind of finagle that in there. There we go. Sorry, I dropped a lock washer. Now I got one more to put back here on this one. This is pretty easy because it's right in the middle. You can actually get a socket on that one. I could probably get a universal joint in here and tighten those up, and that's what I'm probably going to do. Let me go grab one and see if I can do that. Hold on. Okay, so I got a universal socket and a little extension. I should be able to get right in here. Snug those up, no problem. Now, if you drill a hole big enough for your bolt to go through, you could, use a socket on the back side and tighten them up that way. But you remember, all my bolts went in really tight, so that's what I was worried about. I was worried about if I put a socket on the back side, how am I going to turn it? Because it's basically the cut threads as the bolt went in. But this universal socket allows me to tighten them up from this side, which works great. Okay. And cutting this hole like this, it's just so easy to get in here now. So much simpler. I'm not having to fight it. Oh, it's turning on me the other side. Okay, that's all right. Dang it. get it tightened back up. Here, I'll just use the ratchet to tighten it back up with instead of fighting it. All right. This one I'm going to hold with a wrench because it's wanting to turn on me, which is fine. I can hold it with a wrench, no big deal. There we go. You want to get these as tight as you can get them. That's why I like the grade 5, because these grade 3, I think that one's turning too. Yep, that one's turning too. All right. If you use grade 3 bolts, you might break them off trying to tighten them up. So I would definitely recommend using grade 5. Because I can get these really tight. You don't have to worry about them coming off. Yep. So they're all but one is moving on me while I'm trying to tighten it up. So even though they were went in the holes tight, they didn't go tight enough to stay in place. All right. Dang it. Things wanting to still turn on me. I'm trying to get it tighter. There we go. Okay. I'd say that's probably tight enough. All right, now let me tighten these two top ones up. Again, we can use our socket and our wrench, of course. These should be fairly easy. Well, I'm gonna have to, I forgot the, you know what, let's just try it this way. It's pretty tight. All right. I'll just do it from the bottom. It's just hard to get in here to these things to turn them, you know. You got a lock washer on there, so you're gonna have to turn them quite a bit to tighten them up to get the lock washer to collapse down. Come on, baby. Sorry, my big fat head was probably in the way. You guys can't see what I'm doing. I can't see what I'm doing either. All right. All right, now I got this one, last one. Almost there. Okay. All right, so you can see how tight those are. That's where I think a grade 5 bolt makes a difference over a grade 3. But that's just my opinion. You guys obviously can do whatever you think is best for your application. But my recommendation would be to get at least a grade 5 bolt. I mean, I'm sure there's probably people out there that might get a grade 8 bolt. I don't know. But I've got, hold on a second here. So I got 6 bolts holding this mount in, and I got 2 bolts holding this bracket to this bracket. So, you know, I told you guys you're going to use a lot of bolts, right? A lot of bolts, nuts, and washers. So I got 8 bolts, 8 nuts, 8 lock washers, and 16 flat washers just in this one bracket. So that gives you an idea. You know, I got 4 of these to do, plus all the other mounts on this frame. So it's going to be a lot. But anyhow, I think this is probably really the quickest and easiest way to do that. I'll just weld that back in there. And I don't really want to say this, but you could probably leave this out and it wouldn't really affect the frame, because I mean, well, for one, you got this piece here that's a strut basically that's going to hold it in place. On the other side, you don't have that, but you're not cutting a huge hole out of the frame, or just cutting, you know, a hole like this size. So you could probably get away with not welding this back in. I'm not going to tell you you should or shouldn't do that. That has to be your decision. I'm going to weld it back in because I want the integrity back in the frame. But I'm just saying, if you decide to go this method and you didn't have a way to weld that in, you could probably, you know, one thing you could do if you were worried about it, get yourself a piece of metal that's the same width as this and a little longer, and drill a couple holes out here and run bolts through from the back side and put a nut and washer on it and tighten it up. And you know, that would give you some of your structural integrity back. But obviously the best thing to do would be to weld it back in place, and that's what I'm going to do. But anyhow, guys, so that's just one mount, okay? That's just one mount, how long it took me. And of course, I was set up ahead of time to show you guys. So, you know, hopefully the second one will be a little quicker. But this is the front mount. This is how you do the front mounts on this. I got to get the other one set up the same way. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Hopefully it'll help you with some of the information I've shown you. But, you know, this is not a simple process. And I told Russ I was going to try to get an in-depth look at how you do this process, how you get these mounts to fit on the frame. It's not simple. So this is one mount. I still got 3 more to go, so I'll be out here probably all night long. But anyhow, appreciate you guys watching. I was going to try to do more mounts, but I'm just going to do this one because it's so long now already. So appreciate you guys watching. Subscribe to my channel, please. I'm going to be working on this 48 Chevy truck. I still got more work to do on the engine, of course. But keep watching, and we'll keep working on this 48 Chevy truck for Bo. All right, guys. Have a good night. Talk to you later. Bye. All right, guys, so as you can see, I got the passenger side bracket mounted. It went way faster than the first one did because I knew what I was doing a little more. And I decided to add this to the end of this because I did have to make some changes on this one I want to show you guys. And I found out something too that's kind of important that you know. Okay. So, first of all, this one here went on basically the same way. I used the same bolt pattern on it that I did on the other side. Now, one difference I had to make, and I didn't even realize this until I put this bracket on. Hold on a second, let me grab a tape measure. Okay. So, this L bracket that goes on the back side of this mount, I didn't realize this, but it is, it's about 1 inch wide that way and about 1.5 inches that way. I thought it was just a straight L bracket, but it's not. Now on that side there, I was able to use the 1.5 inch side flat on the frame. This side here, because the frame is narrower, and the overlap was too much, I used the 1 inch side on the bottom and the 1.5 inch side vertically, okay? And not only that, but I actually had to take my grinder and I had to notch about, I didn't notch it all the way to the end, I didn't notch it here. I started just on the other side of this bolt hole, about right there, and I cut just enough so it would clear, because the frame, see how the frame overlaps? It's kind of hard to see this. See how the frame overlaps right here? So I cut about probably 1/8 of an inch of it off, and once I got it bolted in place, you can see there's a little bit of a gap there, which is fine, but I had to modify that to make it fit. I might have been able to get away with it, bolting it together. It might have been fine, but I didn't want to chance it, so I just notched it a little bit, no big deal. But anyhow, you need to know that this bracket is actually not even on both sides. Like I said, it's 1.5 one way and 1 inch the other way. I would always recommend using the 1.5 inch side flat down on the frame, because it puts the bolt, the mounting bolt for the top, inboard further. But on this particular mount here, I couldn't do that. I used the 1 inch side down here. Now those, of course, those back there, the frame is not boxed and there's nothing overlapping on top, so I can use the flat side of the L bracket on both of the rear ones. And on that one I did as well. And of course, you guys know, I mean, if you've been around vehicles long enough, you know that when they're slapping these things together at the factory, no two are gonna be alike. So just because what worked for me here doesn't mean it's going to work for you. So, you know, you need to use common sense and your own judgment. But the only change really I had to make on this side was to notch this a little bit and then to use the short side on the bottom instead of the long side. So you need to know that. And one more thing I wanted to tell you guys. I looked at this drill bit that I have. In case you guys want to know, so this drill bit that I'm drilling these holes with is 23/64, okay? So it's 1/64 of an inch less than 3/8. 24/64 would be 3/8. So this is 23/64. So it's just a slight bit smaller, just a teeny bit smaller, you know, 1/64 of an inch than 3/8 of an inch. So it works out really well to drill the holes because the bolts fit in there really tight. I didn't have a problem getting the nuts on any of them, you know, but they fit in there really tight, and it makes for a really nice installation. So if you want to know if you want to get the bit that I got, it's 23/64, okay? One more thing, I just remembered. So when I bolted this together, because I used the short side here, these bolts, these nuts and washers on this side were in the way of putting these in. So even though I had bolted all this together and snugged it all down before I drilled these holes, after I drilled these holes, I had to unbolt these two bolts, pull them out, install these in place, and tighten them down, and then put these back in place over the top of them and tighten them down. Because you can see how close they are together. They're almost touching, okay? And then on the hole here, I cut a little bit taller hole. It's the full length of the frame. Now, if you look at this, let me get the camera out here where you can see what I'm talking about. If you look at this is a pretty big hole in the frame. To me, this would definitely compromise the integrity of this frame. So I definitely need to weld that piece back in. I would not want to run this frame like that. You know, that side over there has got that step, which is basically a gusset, which makes it a lot stronger. But, you know, if I'm going to weld this side in, I'm going to weld that side in. So anyhow, that's a few tips that I learned just installing the passenger side mount. And another thing you want to remember, you've got 4 mounts, 2 tall ones and 2 short ones. The short ones go in the front, the tall ones go in the back. And you want to put these mounts to where this step, or this bracket here, is towards the inside in both the front and the back. So, you know, in the front, it's going to be facing this way. In the back, it's going to be facing forward. So you want to remember that. This is for the running boards. So you want to remember that, okay? Put them facing inward. Short ones in the front, long ones in the back. Okay, now I'm going to get started making the back ones, getting them mounted. And they should be, get this back up here. They should be a lot easier to do because I don't have a box frame to have to deal with. So, you know, this wasn't too bad. It took probably 3 hours to do it. The first one was longer than the second one because, you know, I was checking and double checking. But once I figured everything out, it was great. Now, one other thing, my distance from the bottom of this bracket to the bottom of the frame turned out to be 5/8 of an inch, okay? That's where I ended up using the bottom hole. Obviously, if you use the 4-inch hole, you're going to be basically flush with the bottom of the frame. And of course, if you use any of the holes above that, you're going to be below the bottom of the frame. But you want to make sure that all your brackets measure the same from the bottom of the bracket to the bottom of the frame, no matter where your bracket ends up, or if your bracket's below the frame, from the bottom of the frame down to the bottom of the bracket. You want to make sure that all those end up the same spot, because again, you want these brackets to all be the same height so that when you put your running boards on, they sit level across the body. So that's important. This measurement up here turned out to be the same basically on both sides. It was 4 5/8. You know, using the bottom holes, of course, it's going to be different. But when I checked these and I got these all 5/8, these all 4 of these were the same too. So I know these are right. They should be good to go. So now it's time to start on the back brackets. I'm going to be up late tonight working on this thing, but that's okay. Anyhow, that's just a quick add-on to this, so you know the differences between the passenger side mount and the driver's side mount. I got both those on now. So anyhow, I'm going to start on the back ones. I'll make a separate video for that. So if you guys like this, subscribe to my channel, and we're going to keep working on this 48 Chevy truck, guys. All right, thanks for watching. Appreciate it. Talk to you later. Bye.